When was the very last time thinking actually made you smile? You know that feeling, right? Maybe it was the sudden rush of finally cracking a really tough puzzle, or that incredible aha moment when a complex, messy concept just suddenly clicks in your brain. Take a quick second to reflect on that. It's such a deeply relatable human experience, isn't it?
Welcome to this explainer. I am so absolutely thrilled you're here with us because today we are going to completely reframe how we view the cognitive labor of learning. I mean, so often we treat thinking like a chore, right? Like this heavy lifting of the mind that we just have to slog through. But what if we flipped that? What if we placed joy right at the absolute center of human development?
Okay, let's dive into this roadmap. We'll start with the hidden joy of thinking, then map out 5 modalities of pleasure. After that, we'll look at sparking deep curiosity in childhood, nurturing that exact spark through the school years, and how it shapes the passionate thinker in adulthood. Finally, we'll wrap up by rethinking education and learning as a whole. All right, part 1. The hidden joy of thinking and moving beyond cognitive labor. So, developmental psychology is revealing something pretty wild. Thinking isn't just some dry, robotic mechanism for survival or getting good grades. It is, at its very core, a deeply pleasurable pursuit. Everything in this explainer is grounded in a truly fascinating 2025 paper published in the European Journal of Developmental Psychology, written by Tania Zittoun. Drawing heavily on sociocultural psychology, which sounds dense but is actually super interesting, Zittoun's work gives us the perfect foundation. She meticulously breaks down how the sheer pleasure of thinking actually aids and drives human development, literally from infancy all the way through to adulthood. Moving right along to section 2, 5 modalities of pleasure, where we'll map the joy of the mind. Zittoun argues that psychological pleasure can be broken down into 5 distinct categorizable types. And these are basically going to guide the rest of our journey together. First up, we've got curiosity, which fundamentally grows out of surprise. Second is functional pleasure, which is really just enjoying the mental activity itself, just for the sake of it. Third is discovery, which is that beautiful light bulb aha moment of insight. Fourth is dialogical pleasure. Think of that electric joy you get when sharing and brainstorming with others. And finally, meta-pleasure, which is the deep, deep satisfaction of actually being aware of and enjoying your own brilliant ideas.
Now, to really grasp how these 5 modalities work in the real world, we need to quickly define our terms. In this academic context, thinking isn't just basic brain activity. It's the act of connecting ideas through symbols and language, what psychologists formally call semiotic mediation. Basically, by making things symbolic, we can disconnect from immediate physical action and just explore ideas freely. And pleasure? It's defined here as a dynamic tension seeking an object or understanding. Think of it like a mental itch that you just absolutely love to scratch.
That brings us to section 3, childhood, sparking deep curiosity, which is really where this lifelong journey begins. The cool thing is we can actually observe these 5 pleasures in their earliest, most raw forms in babies and toddlers. The incredibly famous developmental psychologist Jean Piaget closely watched for these early signs of functional and meta pleasure. He actually observed an infant who unintentionally fell backward onto a pillow and then deliberately got herself right back into a sleeping position, pressing her little hands to her face. She stayed totally motionless with her eyes wide open, just smiling quietly. In that moment, she was experiencing the incredible meta pleasure of realizing, wait a minute, I can invent a game. I have the power of imaginative play. And this brilliantly illustrates how that raw curiosity scales over time. Take the documented life of a child named Addie, who was studied by researcher Susan Ingle. At age 2, little Addie is fascinated by a red leaf and curates a tiny collection. By 4, she's completely captivated by a June bug. Fast forward to 11, and her curiosity has totally scaled up into building an extensive zoological collection that literally takes up 3 whole walls of her bedroom. And by 18, she heads off to college to study biology. It's this perfect step-by-step chronological progression, showing how raw, early curiosity, when supported by a good environment, transforms into formalized long-term passion. On to section 4, school years and nurturing the spark, also known as the classroom challenge. See, when that raw, free-flowing curiosity meets the rigid, rule-bound structures of formal education, the transition from home to school becomes a massive test. It tests whether a child's natural curiosity is going to be cultivated into a structured interest, or if it'll just be completely crushed by frustration. Because the harsh reality is that classrooms often inadvertently drain the joy straight out of learning, unless a safe, dedicated thinking space is deliberately created for students to actually explore their own ideas. So the crucial point here is perfectly captured in a longitudinal study of a young student named Hazel. Hazel's first teacher tried to force an interest, practically demanding she write a story about a goat. And the result? Total frustration and sulking. Because, quite frankly, Hazel wanted to write about dragons and stegosauruses. But the next year, a new teacher did something brilliant. She leveraged an existing interest. Knowing Hazel was obsessed with dinosaurs, the teacher provided dinosaur books to teach her reading and writing. The result was these absolutely joyful, brilliant stories about a dinosaur taking off its skin to take a bath. It perfectly shows how educators can inject functional pleasure directly back into the hard work of learning. Which leads us nicely to Section 5, adulthood, the passionate thinker engaging deeply with the world.
Because the pleasure of thinking absolutely isn't just a child's game, it is the fundamental driving engine for deeply engaged, passionate professionals. Just consider the highly influential social psychologist Kurt Lewin. He held these regular Tuesday lunch meetings with his colleagues and students, and historical accounts describe these lunches as just being filled with incredibly animated conversations, wonderfully bad puns, intense group thinking, and this massive sense of shared dialogical pleasure. Lewin was a brilliant, highly professional adult who was deeply, visibly enjoying the sheer act of collective thought.
A colleague of his named Matt Kinnon said it best, and I just have to read this quote to you. It was love that existed and drew the group together. Lewin enjoyed what he was doing. That is such a powerful anchor for us. True intellectual leadership, the kind of leadership that literally creates new scientific systems and draws a devoted following, it's rooted in an intrinsic emotional love for the problems being solved. And finally, Section 6, rethinking education and learning by applying the 5 modalities. So, how do we take all this brilliant academic theory and connect it directly back to our everyday practical lives? Well, here is what you should really take away from this and why it matters so much right now. Whether you're a parent, a teacher, or just a lifelong learner trying to navigate a complex world, we all need to start treating affects and joy as a core part of thinking, not as some optional break from it. We have to harness that innate inner drive for meaning. We need to be observers of our own curiosities, both the big, conscious ones and those tiny, unconscious sparks. And critically, we must deliberately create safe, participatory spaces where those raw, messy ideas can organically grow into lifelong passions. Which leaves me with a final, provocative thought for you to ponder as we wrap up. How will you deliberately inject the pleasure of thinking into your own learning environments today? If you can cultivate those 5 modalities, curiosity, functional pleasure, discovery, dialogical pleasure, and meta-pleasure, you might just fundamentally change the way you and the people around you experience the whole world. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep seeking out those aha moments, and I'll catch you next time.